right now. So this will be recorded and available for later viewing. And the only other question I have for everyone today is just wanted to make sure that you are on our distribution list. And if you are not, if you could send an email to volunteer@percdublin.org, we'll make sure to get you signed up so that you are kept in the know about upcoming programs. Oh, and I did have one, I'm sorry, I lied. There was one more thing too. On February 18th, we're going to have an implicit bias presentation, anti-racism presentation given by Steve Francis, and we very much hope to see you at that one as well. Without further ado, I will turn it over to Megan and Kim.
Thanks very much, Carrie, and good morning, everyone. We're very happy to be here in this online format with you, wishing obviously we could be in person, but understanding right now this is the way that things go. So Kim and I are not physically together, so we'll work together to get through this, because usually when we do this, we get to be together and play off our conversation. So bear with us as we figure out our online kind of mojo this morning. But and I have to say, as part of Kim's 33 years, the 1 year I was an intern at Dublin Scioto, I was her intern. So we have been together for a while, and it's great to be back. So Kim, do you want to add anything before we get going?
I don't think so. Just good morning. And again, just bear with us because this online presenting and online format sometimes can be a little tricky. So again, bear with us. And we have a gnat problem here at the bridge. And I just want to let you all know that if I'm swapping or slapping, it's because I'm killing gnats. So I'm not just randomly doing that.
Good to know. Yes. All right. So we'll jump right in. And just so you're aware, we have done this presentation before, pre-pandemic and pre-COVID. So we're really interested to kind of hear from you all what you're seeing in this new world that we're living in, because some of these statistics and things we're going to be talking about, I think it's really different now because of how things are going. So this is just to kind of start, right? I mean, we're going to be thinking about students from elementary up through high school, but just thinking about adolescence, I liked this graphic that I found a while ago, right? Where it seems like in the moment, often something that happens is the end of the world. But then when we step back and are able to reflect, it's often that, really it was just an unpleasant maybe experience. And really it's a lesson to be learned. So that's kind of the framework and just thinking about things, and we have to meet our kids where they are in that moment. And it might feel like the end of the world to them. But our hope today is just to discuss and think about, our roles as the adults in their world, how we can best support them through these times.
And I think it's super important to think about the reality that they're at such a different developmental state. And so what we might think is unpleasant might be life altering for them. And I wanted to say too, I know through just presenting to the kids online, if you can unmute, if you have anything you'd like to say, please feel free to do that. We might be talking over each other, but it does make for a little bit more fun interacting with each other.
I agree, absolutely. So our goals today, discuss challenges that we see with our youth today, general stress, and specifically we'll dive a little deeper into anxiety, social conflict, and then technology use, which is I think where, obviously things are very different than they were the last time we did this presentation, which was actually right before everything kind of shut down last March. So we'll talk about that, identify what struggles and changes are to be expected for young people versus when it's a good time to say, okay, I need a little extra help or I need to seek some support, because there's going to be times that our kids struggle and sometimes that's okay. So we'll talk about that. And then think about strategies and learn strategies that can help. And we'll talk a little bit about available resources, time permitting. So we're going to start here with a couple things, just thinking if you think it's a myth or a fact. So I can't actually see the chat the way I'm presenting. So I don't know if anybody is comfortable speaking up or if Carrie, if you get any feedback. Myth or fact, sometimes I have to let my child make their own choice, even if I know they're going to fail. Can you see the chat, Kim?
Or you guys can unmic.
Yes, or unmute, feel free, safe space.
Oh, I got a fact.
Fact, yes, absolutely. Oh, I'm clicking fact. It's hard, right, to watch our kids struggle, but sorry, here we go. Letting children have control over small things means that they're going to value our opinion on the bigger things. So if we're constantly, being that helicopter parent and always trying to, fix things before we let children fail, it doesn't give them the confidence to feel that they're able to solve their own problems and have success. So we can have guiding principles and values, right, as our individual family units, and that can help shape the expectations for our children, but it's important to let them fail sometimes. And it empowers them, right? It gives them the confidence, like I said, to feel that they can be out on their own in the universe. All right, myth or fact? Something is wrong if my child does not have a best friend.
I'll say myth.
Myth. I was going to say, yes, myth. This is, I think, one of the most interesting things, at least from my experience, getting to work with kids all the way from kindergarten up through high school, just seeing how developmentally, so much changes, obviously, but friendships really, really ebb and flow over the course of time. And especially, again, even pre-pandemic and remote learning, kids are so connected in different ways through social media and through technology and video games, and now that's amplified even more because many are not able to see friends in person as often, or if at all. And the bottom line is, if our kids are happy with their friendships, I mean, who are we to judge that? Because I will sometimes have the conversation with parents where, well, they had a best friend in elementary school, and now middle school, they're having all these issues, or they have one group of friends that they're pretty close with, but not a best friend. And my first question is, well, do they, are they happy with how things are? And if that answer is yes, then, it's not for us to impose what we think that they should have as a friend or as a best friend. So last one, myth or fact? I need to monitor everything my child does online. And this may be more.
We did have a question on the last myth or fact. What if
Sure.
my child says they don't have any friends?
That's a great question. And we run into that at all ages. That comes up as well. So I think trying to ask more questions and kind of see what else they feel related to that, if they have friendships that have kind of been in that ebb and flow and they're not feeling like they have a friend right now, and encouraging the extracurriculars outside of school, which again, I know right now is very different, but that's a big push that I try to support students with, is finding at least one thing that they think they're even a tiny bit interested in outside of, the classroom and outside of the day-to-day school hours, because it's just an opportunity to connect with people, whether they're the same age or a little older or a little younger, with similar interests. So, and reaching out to your school, we'll talk about that as we move forward. But if it's, reaching out to a guidance counselor or a teacher at school that your student trusts or that you trust, and seeing what's available that we can offer at school too.
And I think too, just, helping kids to understand, what are friendship skills? What kind of things do we need to know how to do to become friends with others, and to help support our kids to feel good about what qualities they have to share with other folks. So kind of hope that there will be friends that they can find common interests with, because they've got things that are great to share about themselves.
I'll go ahead and tell us this one, the myth, right, about monitoring everything online, which may be more tempting more than ever these days. I like the analogy though from Time Magazine here, where thinking about the upsides and downside of having all the information, right? Like if we got a full body scan and there was a spot on our liver that really was never going to be an issue, but now we know it's there, and we, think about treating it, it might be more invasive to have a surgery, for the spot, when really it was never going to be anything we needed to know about. So, thinking that having all that information and constantly seeing what our kids are doing, isn't necessarily the best way to support them with their technology use. And we'll talk more about some ways that we can do that.
Someone had a comment on that that I liked as well. They said, I feel that monitoring online usage is very important, but it's a myth in practice. So many kids, so many devices. And I
Yeah.
think that's true. I think a lot of times people would say, oh, yes, I monitor my child's devices, but it's hard to keep up with everything.
Yes. Well, and you've probably or maybe heard the term, digital native versus digital immigrant, meaning that, we, all of us as adults now weren't born with availability of an iPhone, right? Whereas many kids now have had access to an iPad or some sort of technology before, as soon as they are able to, sit up. And so just thinking that kids are very savvy with it, and they, if we're trying to have that constant, if they know that we're constantly monitoring what they're doing, they often can find ways to, be untruthful, or it causes more conflict for them to try to then find a way to kind of sneak around, for lack of a better way to describe it. So it's better to have the open conversations and discuss the expectations around technology, as opposed to, constantly watching everything that they're doing. So thinking about what does normal even mean? And I like this comic, right? It's the monster under the bed said he's feeling like there's something on top of the bed. So it's all perspective, right? And it's all relative. What's normal for one child is not going to be normal, quote unquote, right, for another or another family. And it's all going to just depend on the developmental stage, the family, the student, everything. So considering development, right, obviously things are a little different if we're talking about a 7-year-old versus a 15-year-old, and just keeping that in mind as we go through everything. And you know your child best. I mean, we are obviously here at school and we see students a lot of time throughout their childhood, but you are the experts, and parents and caregivers know children best. And that's why we like to partner with you all to figure out how we can support when they're with us. Talking to support network, I mean, we'll get more into that as well, but using your resources, whether it's informal, friendships, family, but more formal if you need to reach out to school, administrators, guidance counselors, teachers, us, know that we can all kind of have those discussions together about what quote unquote normal might look like. And then these two things, right? I mean, what does normal even mean right now in a global pandemic and political climate? I mean, we didn't know really how else best to phrase that, but just thinking, I just saw, we've had 3 Wednesdays in January, and something, major has happened every Wednesday. So, just thinking about our world in the last year, I feel like there's been so many, I mean, it feels trite to say there's been so many things happening, but there are. So just keeping that in mind and helping our kids through that, and being open with them, if they're struggling with any of these things, because it's obviously new experiences for all of us.
And I think just, when you talk about normal and normalcy and typical, I mean, I think this year, you've got your challenges that you typically have, just kind of navigating the world. And now we've got some things that I think students and children, I mean, they don't know how to manage, and neither do we as adults. And that's that global pandemic, the political climate, everything that's kind of going on around us in this cloud. And that it's okay for us to say to the kids, yeah, we're trying to figure this out just as you are. And how can we do this together?
Absolutely. So stress today, these are things that we've been talking about now for a while. And these are the things that we see often working in schools. The anxiety, right, I feel is at an all-time high at kind of at all age levels, and related to the things we just were mentioning, right? Just the state of our current world and the constant news stream, right? I mean, that's whether TV or social media or just technology in general, we have that instant information, and it can be difficult for adults and certainly children to process that and to figure out, like Kim was just saying, what's going on. The social pressures and conflict, which can be related to the technology concerns. And then also identity development is something to think about. Really, I mean, any age, but certainly like the middle school years and moving into high school, that puberty time, and just figuring out where we fit in the world. And that can become, challenging with factoring in all these other things. And then also thinking like, where do I fit in, and who am I going to be, and what do I value? So Those are the things that we see. I don't know if anyone feels like sharing or typing in the chat something that we're missing here, or if this is the same sorts of things now. Many of you may be, you're quote unquote teachers for your students right now at home, or if you're seeing things, that we missed here, we'd love to hear.
So this is Pallavi. Can I share something that I'm observing about my child?
Certainly.
He's in 5th grade, 10 years old. Very recently, he has a lot of anxiety, and he keeps saying that he does not have any friends in school, and he doesn't want to go to school. That's the first thing about friendships. And the second, he's saying that he thinks that kids are looking at him. He gets anxious about it. The kids are looking at him. Is there something wrong with him? Is he weird? Those kinds of questions that he's asking, and I'm getting worried about him. So just wanted some advice on this. How do I help him or support him? Should I take it to the counselor, or how do I deal with it?
Certainly. I think absolutely the guidance counselor is a great person to connect with and just share some of those concerns. And often I think with kiddos who are having those really feelings of anxiety, kind of what we consider scaffolding things, or taking those really small baby steps to kind of lead up to something, can be helpful for him. So, the guidance counselor could certainly help. I don't know if your student is, physically going into the building right now, but even if not, they could help, with kind of taking those baby steps in the context of school, and help him, find his comfort level and maybe build some of that confidence. But absolutely, I think reaching out to the guidance counselor is a great first step.
And I think even, working to normalize it a little bit for your son, because I think the way everything is set up this year, and with all the challenges we have, it's even, if it was hard for him to feel like he had friends while he was going to school every day, how much harder is it now that he's hybrid, or he's remote learning? It's a difficult time. So everything that he's feeling may be heightened, and just to kind of help him by again, I keep saying this, giving him the confidence to know that this may be temporary, and that you're going to get him the support and the help that he needs to feel confident that this is temporary. If that makes sense.
In the past, we have worked with the counselor for some other issues, but he feels like when he works with the counselor, something is wrong with him.
Yes. I think, as Kim, just to reiterate that message, trying as much as you can, normalizing that we all need help with something, right? And right now, this is just something that the counselor is a resource for him, and here to support him. And I know that's not always something that he might have to hear multiple times, or, see that modeled from you, that it's okay that he needs help with these things. It will take him, I think, probably just a little time to kind of get to that point. And maybe as he is getting older too, understanding that, we all are working on something and needing some help, he might have some comfort, or not feel as self-conscious about receiving that help. I was going to say, just to Kim's point, I don't think I ever mentioned my schools I'm primarily at this year. I'm at Grizel Middle School and Deer Run Elementary across the way. And then I'm also at Scioto to help some this year. And I'm just seeing, like, with the friendship piece, especially our 6th graders coming in here at Grizel, it's just such a tough year to start a whole new school, be with, new students that you haven't been exposed to before, not having the social connection. So just, again, reiterating that this year is just is hope. It's temporary, hopefully, right? And we'll be able to get back to some sense of a normal school day, and have those opportunities for socialization too. So.
And I'm going to real quickly just, we'll talk about this a little bit later on too, but I think it's really important sometimes for boys. I think we tend lots of times to, have talks with our girls about what's going on in their bodies and what's happening to them developmentally, and what kind of moods they're going to be going through, and how strong their feelings might be. And because for whatever reason, it's considered more normal for girls to go through some of these things as they grow. And so just to think too about how much does he know about his own development, his own body, his own brain, that these kind of things can happen through adolescence. So kind of to combat that something's wrong with me sort of thinking. There's a lot of books out there that kind of go, there's my gnat problem, that kind of go through, just developmental changes that boys go through, that it may be good to take and sit down and read with him.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. So our kind of point here, what we're going to dive into is when these things interfere with daily functioning, that's when we want to decide what to do. So we're going to break things apart. Okay. So thinking about anxiety, kind of to your point that you were just sharing too, thinking about what is okay, because anxiety is expected in our lives. And back to that part that is a myth, right? That we, or I forget how it was phrased, but the point that we have to let our children experience anxiety and have to let them fail sometimes, so that they can build that confidence. So it's expected, right? And feeling worried is okay, but being able to recover from the worry and continue to go on with your day is where it's at. And the ability to persevere even when worried. Like I was just talking with a student this morning who was a little nervous for a test, but he made it to school anyways. So, he totally a normal response, worried, this is kind of a big science test. I had to study, and we talked about what he did to prepare, but he was here and he was able to come and complete the test. So that's a quote unquote normal, experience of anxiety. So when should we ask for help? So, these are the things where it's interfering with somebody's daily functioning, right? If the anxiety gets to these levels, panic attacks, which is that physical response, right? Where often it's described as like feeling like a heart attack or a chest tightening, having those somatic responses to anxiety. The constant avoidance, if we have, students who have difficulty, again, this year, very different, but have difficulty coming into school because they're so anxious about anything really, right? It could be related to a social thing or a academic thing or a teacher, anything, but if they're completely avoiding something, then that would be obviously an impairment in functioning. A feeling of constantly being pressured, hassled, hurried, constant irritability, which is, right, can be hard to decipher sometimes in the teenage years. What is typical expected irritability, but if it's that constant, or if it's a new development that you're seeing, isn't really subsiding, that might be something to look a little deeper into. Physical symptoms, especially with our younger students, right? The somatic complaints about stomach issues, headaches, even chest pain, or if they're heading to the nurse a lot, right? The clinic, that we often work with our clinic staff as well, if they're seeing, students coming repeatedly and not really vibing, it's not a physical, illness that we can decipher. Sleeping issues, drinking, right? Drugs, smoking, eating issues, and then obviously the self-injurious behavior too, if that's going on, then that's certainly something that we want to intervene. Kim, did you want to add anything there?
Nope, I think you got it.
Okay.
Sorry, I was having a
A gnat
sneezing
problem?
attack.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's okay. So
Gnats,
this is
sneezing. I'm a mess.
gnats and sneezing. This is from the DSM, which you may be familiar with, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, which is what clinicians use to diagnose anxiety disorders and other mental illnesses. But the point being that this is criteria for an anxiety disorder. And the big one we just wanted to highlight is obviously if the anxiety, worry, or physical symptoms cause clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. So that's what providers would use. Like if you went to speak with a counselor outside of school, or a doctor or a pediatrician or somebody, if they're going to be having these conversations, this is what is kind of the crux of it, right? Our point that anxiety is expected, but it's clinically significant if it's impairing somebody in these areas. So shifting gears a little bit to the social conflict piece and what can we expect, right, over the years for our kids. And again, the message that social conflict is okay and it's expected. And we don't always need to jump right in and try to rescue and protect our kids from, those conflicts. And back to the point that especially our adolescents are forming identities and figuring out where they fit in the world, and one day they might say this is their best friend group, and 2 days later, they want nothing to do with them. There was an issue and now they're hanging out with a different friend or friend group. That is to be expected and not uncommon whatsoever. So it can be hard to try to keep track sometimes. And again, with the social media and technology and the way that kids communicate now, it can be hard to keep track sometimes, but it's completely normal to be figuring that out.
And I think, I've got 2 adult kids now, but the whole developmental thing, I know I'm going to keep kind of harping on that, is so important because it's so easy to look at what our kids are going through our developed brain. And we have to remember to be able to step back and say, their brain isn't fully developed. Their brain is the way that we think rationally. They're not capable of thinking rationally because their brain's not there yet. So it kind of gives you the opportunity to step back and maybe look at some of the things they're doing and feeling and talking about in a different light. And sometimes I guess I think about when I had my kids and when I was going through, and here I am, this professional, like, old lady over here. I still didn't think enough about the development of where they were at. And I think if I had more of that, I would have been able to be a little bit more patient with what they were going through. So I think it's a hugely important thing to think about.
Yes. And there was an article in the New York Times. I mean, we have references listed here at the end, but it was just an interesting article thinking about, kids don't always want to restore friendships, right? I mean, think of us as adults and friendships that we've had through our lives. I mean, there's some that I've been friends, right, with the person for almost my whole life, and others, I could think of a few where it was a couple of years, like it served a great purpose, and then we just kind of grew apart. And there wasn't any major conflict necessarily. It just was like, all right, like this is kind of where things are. And so I think giving kids permission to let them know that, a friend that they had in first grade, like it very well is going to look very different in 7th grade. And if they don't want to be friends with that person, that's okay. Right. And I always reiterate the message to students that, you don't have to be friends with them, but obviously being distant but kind. Sometimes I phrase it that way, right? Like we don't want anybody to be disrespectful or rude, of course, or, mean in any way, but we need to give them permission that it's okay that if they don't want to be friends with somebody, that's all right.
And
go ahead.
It's going to kind of be covered in this piece, but I think the other thing, and again, like how can we empower our kids? And one of the things when we're talking about social conflict is making sure your kids understand what is a healthy relationship. Mm-hmm. What does a healthy friendship look like? What are the qualities of a healthy friendship so that you can help them make some decisions about their social world in a healthy, positive way. And it kind of empowers them and always gives them a little bit of control and choice versus us kind of saying that friend's no good for you. Mm-hmm. Or, this kid's leading you down this path. Again, to kind of flip it so that the kids get some idea that they have choices and can be educated to think in a healthy way.
That's a great point, Kim. I think sometimes we just assume that we figure those things out on our own, and it's like, I can't remember honestly in middle school ever really having a conversation with anyone about what was a healthy friendship that I had versus not. So that's a great point. And I feel like health curriculums and things now and guidance curriculum, like that's certainly something that kids are hearing more, but absolutely good to review, like, what do we actually want in a friend? Just because we've been friends with them or our families are friends or they're our neighbors, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that it's a healthy friendship. So great point. So red flags, right, with social conflict. So obviously if it's a repeated issue with the same peer or peer group, that's a concern. If it's something that, is persistent and pervasive. Cyber safety concerns, which a whole new world again with all of this, right, through kids being on technology for school all day now at some points and in their social lives as well. So if there's a cyber safety concern in any form, obviously that is a red flag. And this is an interesting point, right? Loss of interest in spending time with peers. That's going to be different now because we were talking earlier about, right, like a kiddo being in their room playing a game with their friend on their phone or iPad after they've been on their computer all day for school. So, I mean, it's not a loss of interest. They're still trying to connect, but in today's world, it's just looking a little differently. Interference with functioning at school. It goes back to if a kid is like, I can't go because so-and-so is being mean to me, obviously that would be something we need to help with. And that goes with the school avoidance too. If there's something so big going on that our kid doesn't feel like they can get to school because of a social issue, then we need to intervene and support. All right. So kind of transitioning then into the technology use, I actually updated these statistics just a couple weeks ago from I think 2 years ago when we first did this presentation, and I should have kept them just to compare, but I think this from 2 years ago, the statistic of percentage of teens who have a smartphone, I want to say it was in like the 70s, like 78% or something. And now, it's 95%. And 45, this is what I find very interesting. 45% report that they are on the internet almost constantly, right? So half of our kids are constantly on the internet. And think about, they have their phones in their pockets when they're at school, and they can text like through their hoodie pockets, and they're in the bathroom. It's just pretty remarkable. But when I think about it as an adult too, right? My cell phone's sitting right here, and I turned it upside down so I didn't see if I get a notification. I think many of us could really relate to this and say we're pretty much constantly plugged in these days. So it's something to be thoughtful about.
I think I used this example last time we did this, but we do kind of a focused thinking challenge here at the Bridge, because what we, I feel it's really difficult, to tell the kids, can't you just get off your phone, turn off the computer, come on, 20 minutes. And so what we try to do is educate the kids on, what do you need to think and be focused in your learning? What does a cell phone do to interfere with, bringing short-term memory into long-term memory, and really trying to educate the kids again so that they can make choices. But we did a presentation, and we asked the kids for the presentation to put their phones down. And it was eye-opening to me. Some of the kids, it was physically difficult for them for a short period of time to let go of their phone. And it got so, for some of those kids, it ended up being that we didn't make them do it because of how distressing it was for them. They could tell me that they didn't want to look at their phone, or they could agree to not look at their phone, but they had to have it with them. Mm-hmm. So it's just really interesting how much of their lives are intertwined with their technology.
Well, and Kim and I are both in a training right now for ROCKS. You may have heard of it, Ruling Our Experiences. It's a program to offer to our female students, girls, about empowering girls and empowering women. And we're still learning, but something that resonated with me, Kim, I don't know if you remember from it's an online training obviously right now, but one of the videos we watched, the founder, I think it was saying about cell phones, and like her recommendation or her thought is like we shouldn't take phones as a punishment from our kids because looking at these statistics, right, and it's how they're connected with the outside world. And really, Kim was just saying the physical response, to having it away from them, it becomes a whole other issue and concern, and can just add so much more strife to the situation. And so her recommendations obviously are like those open conversations. If there's an issue where you feel like you need to take the phone, like talking about why that is and what you can do to support them with that, but really trying to avoid like physically taking it from them. So I thought that was an interesting perspective to think about. Just a couple more things here, right? Video games, another part of it. Majority of teens have access to a video game console, and 90% play a video game of some sort. And that's where, kids can talk and have those social interactions as well, right? Because they're communicating over the video game with people they may know or people they may not know. And then 70% of teens use at least one social media site per day. So when should I intervene? When it becomes all consuming and we don't see opportunities or seeking opportunities for socialization, again, different now than it was a year ago when we were talking about this, because this is how our kids are able to socialize right now. And it's kind of, it's great in a way that we really have these opportunities for, given the situation that we're in, because thinking if they didn't have FaceTime or didn't have these games to play while everyone is sitting at home, we really would be more isolated. So it's kind of a blessing and a curse, right, at the same time. And just being thoughtful. And if you're noticing, those negative changes in functioning related to their technology use, that's where, again, you want to intervene and seek support. Sleep is a big one. I feel like not as much lately or not so much this year, but I've had many a conversation where a kid, has a cell phone and the parents like, well, they keep it in their room, but it's fine. Like they don't look at it and they tell me they put it away. And it's like, okay, I mean, sure, that happens in some cases, but I would say most kids tell me, oh, well, I'm getting texts and Snapchats and things at 2 a.m. So I'm awake, and not sleeping. So I think just being thoughtful about letting them have access to that. And I've heard folks who do, like the kitchen is the charging station for all the devices. And so everybody, adults and kids plug everything in by whatever, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, whatever. And then you don't have it until the morning. So just thinking about strategies around that, because it really, really impacts the sleep cycles. And if that becomes an issue, that's when we need to intervene.
And I think that's another opportunity, even with the sleep and the academic and school success, that's kind of what we talked about in terms of social or focused thinking, but even educating the kids on what the light, what the flashing of a cell phone does, all of the ways that you can help them say, wow, maybe this is impacting my sleep. Maybe there's something I should do about it. And how can you help me, mom and dad, or guardian or parent? How can you help me? Versus us, again, solving the problem for them. So giving them as much information and encouraging them to say, gosh, what can I do to manage this in a way that's better for my health?
Absolutely. Well, and FOMO, I know I can't see everyone's face, but I don't know if everyone knows what FOMO means, is fear of missing out. So that's a big piece of certainly the social media, right, world, where if we see, I have to say as an adult, I've had it, right, when I've seen friends or people I know posting something on social media and I wasn't invited, or even if I was and wasn't able to go, right, it's still kind of like, oh, that stinks. Like, I wish I could have been a part of that. So, if your child is experiencing that and they're, upset often because they're seeing these things, that's where having those conversations about what's going on are important.
I just wanted to interject and say, we started out allowing our oldest to have the phone in their room, thinking they would be using it as an alarm clock, kind of was where that started. And where it ended was where he was staying up late and texting friends, and it was a bad situation. And so we had to change it. And so I just wanted to say, if you haven't started out this way, just because you haven't started that way doesn't mean it has to continue that way. So we had to make a wholesale change, and I'm so glad that we did. And then, the second and third kid are not having having to experience going through that lesson. So the oldest one had to learn it for them. But I guess I just wanted to throw that out there, that you can always change things. If you started out one way, you can make it different.
Yes. No, that's a great point. And the point too, that when we were talking earlier about the idea of scaffolding things or baby steps, I think too, we want, when something is upsetting us or hurting us or is not going well, we want, adults or kids, we want the pain to be relieved and we want things to be better and no conflict. That's just our nature. And so we want that gratification right away. But I think setting ourselves up, setting goals, as I think most of us probably know, you've got to start small and say, all right, this isn't going to be fixed next week or maybe next month or in the next couple months, but putting those changes into place and setting that foundation, just taking those baby steps is okay. So that's a great point. And this is just kind of a general thinking, right? Changes. Thinking about the world that we're in, changes are constant. This is always, right, but certainly in the past year, this is even more the case. So talking with our kids and being open about opportunities and positive aspects of change, because we can get stuck on that negative, mindset. And open-ended questions are great here. What do you like about remote learning, or what do you miss about our old house? And just starting those conversations off can really lead in to understanding what our kids are thinking related to changes that we experience. It can be any size. We touched on this a bit earlier, related to meeting our kids where they are. And we might think it's something silly or trivial, but it can be a change of any size, and it's how we're feeling about it that matters in that moment and how we decide to deal with it. So just keeping that in mind, because sometimes it can be easy to dismiss something that we think is not important, but it's the whole world to our kid. And then thinking about natural times of transition that may be stressful, and recognizing that and giving our kids some freedom and some leeway, but also keeping that routine and structure in, right? And I think we're seeing this more than ever with remote learning. So yes, like this is a huge change or something that we all had to figure out last spring, and knowing this is hard. And so I might not expect you to, I don't know, do all of your homework by 5 o'clock. However, let's look at what is most important for you to finish right now, and let's get that done by X time. So just realizing that there's going to be times where we need to be a little more lenient, but we can still be that constant and provide that structure for our kids. So now what? So thinking about all of these things, this is where we're just going to kind of provide some ideas that we wanted to share with you all about what can we do with all this information. So communicating concerns, right? And asking questions with our children and our support network, other parents, school counselors, social workers, whatever community groups you're a part of, family, you're not alone in it. If you feel like there's something that you need to learn more about, or if you feel like you need help for your child, reach out and communicate, because that is huge, especially these days when many of us are isolated more so and maybe not as connected with our own social networks. Formal support network, right? School resources, teacher, counselors, administrators. Pediatrician, honestly, is always a good first line of defense. I will often recommend parents connect with their pediatrician if there's a concern related to functioning, because it really is important. Kim has spoken to it a lot, just the developmental things, but I think it's huge to rule out any sort of physical situation, like hormonal things or nutritional things, because that can have a huge impact on our, not obviously just our physical health, but our mental and emotional health. So it's great to use them as a resource, and they can often connect. They're a good person to connect you with. If you're looking for a counselor or a therapist, they can, they know your child probably for a long time, and so they can help you connect with those people too. And related to therapy, I talk to kids a lot, and they're like, well, yeah, I have this therapist and I don't think I like them, or, I've been to 3 people and I didn't like the first 2. And just recognizing that if that's something that you are seeking, it's not always going to be the best fit right off the bat, and letting your child know that, and just giving it a try, certainly. But then if it's not working or the vibe is not right, reaching out and trying again with somebody else, because if that's something that you wish to pursue, are opportunities. There's many opportunities. And today, obviously, it looks a little different with telehealth as well, but just be aware that it's okay to seek other help.
Yeah, I think about that a lot, just because, I kind of say, when you buy a car, you don't buy the first car you sit in. If you don't like how it feels and how it drives, you're going to go to the next car. And I think sometimes kids and adolescents and parents think, yeah, we have to stay with this person if we start with this person. And I'm not saying that you don't give it a try, because it takes a while to build relationships, but you do have the option. That's a service to you. So it's amazing sometimes when you find a person who is a good fit, you'll know it. And then secondly, I think the whole stigma around mental health and counseling, it's whether we like it or not, it's prevalent. I know you guys have probably heard of the On Our Sleeves campaign that Nationwide Children's Hospital is working with right now. And just to kind of help kids know that counseling can be a tool. It's just a tool. We all need tools sometimes to feel better and to function the best we can. And so, why not try the tool, and it kind of takes away the stigma, and it again helps kids make a choice to say, well, what's out there that can help me be as healthy as I can be, and why not try it? So just again, and the reality that I don't know anybody out there that at one point or another in their life couldn't use a little support. So how to help your kids understand that it's okay. It's not forever either. It doesn't mean you go to counseling that you are you're crazy or you're going to have to continue to go to counseling the rest of your life. You could use that tool for a while, get some skills, and move on.
Mhm.
So again, just how you approach it with your kids can be really important.
Absolutely. And that kind of leads us into this next piece, you know, the whole idea of monkey see, monkey do, right? Kids are looking to us even when we don't think they are. And especially in those adolescent years when maybe we're, you know, butting heads a little more, they're still wanting our reassurance and our, you know, affection and love, of course, all the time unconditionally, but just being able to model the positive skills as adults is huge because they're watching even when we think that they're not. And thinking about how that relates to coping skills that we have, right? And how we solve conflict and how we use technology. It's really hard to tell the kids to plug in their phones or disconnect while we're sitting there, right? Checking our work email or whatever the case is. So just being that role model and recognizing what our role is in helping them develop these skills. And same thing, right? We can't expect if we're constantly, you know, if our conflicts, if we're resolving them in unhealthy ways, it's really hard to expect our kids to learn those skills as well. And looking to us for guidance, even when it doesn't feel like it. And the big one, right, is admitting when we're struggling with something and it's okay because we're not all okay all the time. And I think Kim touched on this earlier, but just thinking about we're all going through these situations that we're in the world right now. And some days I just am, you know, it's hard to figure out what's going on and how I'm feeling and identifying with things. So it's okay to admit that to our kids and say, yeah, like it's been a really weird month so far. Like I recognize in myself that, you know, I've been eating worse and I've not been getting enough sleep, you know, and just saying like, this is what I'm seeing for me. What's going on for you? How is this going for you? So having those conversations.
Yeah, and making sure that kids know it's okay to even kind of be on an up and down with what's going on in the world. I know, you know, I keep hearing the whole COVID fatigue or whatever we're calling it, and I kind of realized in myself, wow, I'm seeing that now. Like there's a difference between how I felt like I was handling things earlier on, and it took me a while to admit that I was having some trouble dealing with it continuing. And so you think about, again, that brain that we have that is rational and fully developed and how we struggle with all of this and throw all of this at a teenager or a middle schooler who doesn't have the same kind of capacity to use their brain to help them see through it. So you might see things that are coming out in your kids that you're like, where the heck is this coming from? And it might be coming from them just attempting to cope with this cloud that we're all sort of dealing with right now. And to be able to have those honest conversations with kids is really important. I was having one of those with my 24-year-old recently, just because it's so relevant, and it was nice to be able to talk to him. And he said it was nice for me to be able to say, I'm not doing so well with this right now either. So again, those conversations are huge.
Something I work with kids a lot, and I'm sure Ken can speak to this as well, is that positive self-talk and helping kids identify the helpful versus unhelpful thoughts, which is really hard because our brains play those tricks on us, you know, where it's like, oh, I failed this test. I'm dumb in science now. You know, I'm not going to take the classes I need to in high school. I'm not going to get the job right that I want. And our brains can just like go down these traps and these ways that are really hard to break because they've kind of been ingrained, or that's our default sometimes. And so helping kids realize like what's a helpful thought versus what's an unhelpful thought and how to reframe situations is something that can really make a difference. Validating feelings, but not falsely reassuring is also huge, right? Meeting them where they are and saying, wow, like that must be so hard that I can't, you know, I'm sorry that happened today. I can't believe that happened. You know, I hear you and I'm here for you, but also not saying, oh, everything's going to be okay. It's going to be fine. I promise tomorrow, everything's going to be fine. It's easy to default to that, I think sometimes, but I mean, honestly, we don't know that it's going to be fine tomorrow. And well, that might not some kids that might just go in one ear and out the other. But if we're constantly reassuring and saying, oh, it's going to be fine, I promise you everything's going to work out okay. And just that realization that sometimes it doesn't. And so just being honest in those conversations as well, but you can always validate their experience and what they're feeling. And back to the idea of resisting the urge to take over and solve the problem for them. Letting them struggle a little bit is all right, and it's expected. A biggie too is not forcing kids, anyone, right? We can't force anybody to talk if they're not ready, but letting them know that we're available and helping our kids identify their formal support network, whether it's somebody at school, community groups they're part of, if they have other family members that they can reach out to that's not in the immediate family at home, if they need somebody to reach out to, just helping them identify those people. And again, paying attention to the technology use and seeing how if it's impacting functioning or how it's interfering with those aspects of their lives, and just being thoughtful about that. So routines and structures at home, I mean, more than ever, right, with remote learning, I feel like this is something that we've all kind of had to figure out, working from home and our students working from home. And it's going to be different for every child and every family, as with all of this, and it's relative for what works for them. But kids really do thrive on having that routine and structure. I know when we first went into remote learning, kids were motivated and were getting up, at least the many that I talked to, and were figuring out, what they needed to do. But then a lot of the structure wasn't in place because we were kind of thrown into it. And then it was hard to keep the motivation going for students that I spoke with, like, well, I don't know, because one teacher is doing this and one's doing this and it's too much. And so they need that routine and that structure to be able to feel successful and have that comfort to know what to expect.
And I think one of the things I've realized with the remote learning too is just how a lot of kids just don't have the skills to self-manage. And so I know I keep talking about what can we teach kids, what skills can we give them? And I think lots of times when we think about establishing a routine and structure for kids, we also have to remember, how do we teach them to establish a routine and structure for themselves? And I think that, school gave our kids that routine and that structure, and it's been really difficult for kids to say, how do I do that for myself when I don't have that in-person structure and leadership? So it's just another thing to think about, just self-management skills and how you can help kids with what tools they might need to get better at structuring a routine for themselves, especially if they're older adolescents. And I think, when you talk about COVID and the pandemic, this is one of the bright lights for me, is I think kids are learning a little bit more of this now. They're being forced to. So hopefully when they move on to college and in other areas of their lives, they're going to have some things that are going to help them be more successful later that they might have had to struggle with their freshman year or when they're first graduating from high school. So in a way, I think kids are kind of getting some skills, forcing themselves to learn some skills right now because of the situation we're in. So, a positive, with a silver lining, I guess.
Yes. I don't know that we have touched on this much today, but the idea of praising effort for our kids is important, instead of saying something like, you're so smart, I knew you were going to get 100 on that. Saying like, oh, you must have studied really a long time. What did you do to prepare for that test? Or questioning and realizing that it's about the effort and the work and the journey and not just the end result. Because at some point, they're probably not going to get 100 on a test. And if that's what we're praising, it's hard for them to sometimes reconcile then, like, oh, well, shoot, well, I didn't get that 100 and so I must be a failure, or it goes back to that self-talk that our brains can trick us with. And so the effort is really where we want to focus the praise and the attention. And again, the sentiment, don't prevent our kids from experiencing anxiety producing events, and praising success and helping them feel empowered. And it's okay to praise success still, right? I mean, if you get the 100 on the test, that's okay. But just having those discussions and asking those little bit of deeper questions instead of just validating them for getting a perfect score. teach and model mindfulness skills, being present in the moment. I think this is tough these days with the constant news, as we've been saying, and cell phone. I mean, I find myself scrolling through things, you know, while I'm sitting, the TV's on, but I'm like scrolling, and it's hard to be mindful at times. And so teaching that and modeling that and realizing that all we have is the present moment, you know, that's all we can count on is right now. And so just helping them recognize that and teaching and practicing. I mean, you know, there's lots of, I'm sure you've seen them, many mindfulness apps, like Calm is a great one that I use often. And, you know, there's lots of things that can teach us and help us model those things. But it's important that we do that for our kids too.
And I think, you know, in addition to that is, you know, trying to look at being proactive and knowing that self-care is so important when we're in this cloud. And like Megan said earlier on, like maybe I'm not eating as well. I noticed recently that I'm not exercising like I've been exercising, and I've noticed a big difference. So how as a family can you say, you know, what can we do right now? Because we got to be taking care of ourselves, because there's a lot of stuff going on in our world that isn't in our control. So we got to be at our best. So again, you know, mindfulness is one of those skills. You know, we've been talking a lot about gratitude in our program. We've been talking a lot about looking for the positive. You know, even starting your day or ending your day with what good happened today, and doing that as a family. And it doesn't seem like much, but again, it's teaching them those positive, healthy coping skills and getting through a time when, unfortunately, we can't tell them tomorrow's going to be okay. It's a crazy time.
Mm-hmm. So the last piece here, don't Google everything. Full disclosure, I just added this because you know, I've been doing this work now for a while and getting to learn, and I love learning new things and new research and information and helping kids and helping families. But I just recently, I have a baby at home. So I have a 7-month-old at home. And I learned very quickly that I was Googling way too much. This summer when he was born, you know, I was Googling and I was like, one website says, let him cry. Don't, you know, the other one says, don't let him cry. This is how you sleep, you know, sleep train him. And then the other one says this. And I mean, I knew this before in theory, but it really dawned on me that the internet, right, has any information that we really want to find, we'll be able to find the answer we're looking for. So I don't know if other people have experienced that, but that has been something present for me. You know, I want that instant gratification of somebody tell me, like, how do I get this baby to sleep through the night? But you know, in the end, it's like, I've got to do what works for me. And I found out already, I mean, as a baby, he's pretty much he's figured it out, and we figured out a routine, and reading the things on Google didn't really, you know, make that any easier or any better. It's kind of just, it happened. So I think that's something to consider as well. All right. So we'll just throw some things up here. I mean, there's so much, I mean, the internet, right? To that point, you can find anything that you are looking for out there, but these are a few things, and we can share this out, you know, with Carrie and Kathy, but these are a few places to check out, or books that we have used in the past. And Grit is a pretty popular book that some of you may have read, but it's a good one about exploring perseverance and effort is success instead of, you know, just praising the outcome. And then there's the Anxiety and Depression Association. I mean, lots of resources. Child Mind Institute I get their weekly emails, and they actually I find them very useful, and they provide information for parents and educators and about all sorts of childhood concerns and issues, and give, I think, really kind of hands-on useful strategies. So that's a website that I think is worth checking out.
And I love the Big Life Journal. We use it with some of our, well, when we have groups again. But I really like it because it does, especially if you've got a kid who's pretty intellectual, it's a nice way, again, to give them information and empower them to make healthy choices. And it's also a really great opportunity for them to teach you some things too. So to have them share with you what they're learning in the journal is a great way to kind of bond and work together for the common goal of wellness.
Yeah. And these are just, I mean, we're fortunate at Columbus. We have a lot of resources. Children's Hospital obviously is a huge one, with a lot of different centers and different professionals who have a lot of knowledge and a lot of things to share. And given telehealth is obviously something that we're working through right now with a lot of these services, But knowing that it's available, and there are still unfortunately waiting lists, to get into these things sometimes, but just knowing that it's out there, and you can always reach out to find out more information if it's something that you think you and your child are interested in. So that's all we have as far as material for everyone, but we would be happy to take questions or comments or what you're seeing related to learning at home or anything.
Hey, Megan, thank you so much. It's Carrie. I just wanted to throw one resource out there that I have found very helpful. The book, Permission to Feel, Unlocking the Power of Emotions to Help Our Kids, Ourselves, and Our Society Thrive. It's by Mark Brackett. Not sure if you're familiar with it, but probably the number one takeaway I took from that book was if a child says they're stressed, that stressed is not an emotion, that there are things that are underlying that emotion. And so it's more a matter of trying to understand, are you really feeling overwhelmed? Are you angry about something? So that was a very helpful tip to have. And I think it's really helped me with my kids. Can you, someone just wants me to type that book name out. I will put that in the chat, sure. But I found that to be a really helpful read. And then we had someone who, I just wanted to make sure if people aren't familiar with the chat, I wanted to just put this out there. Someone had said that they had worked with their elementary daughter's guidance counselor regarding friend issues, and the counselor had set up an interactive lunch bunch where she invited her daughter and a few other girls that the counselor had identified as having similar types of issues. The girls were unaware of the purpose, being that they were there to form some bonds. They just thought it was fun to have those lunch bunches. And so she was just kind of throwing that out there as a possibility that that might be something helpful.
Absolutely. I've heard of that's, yes, I've heard of those too and been a part of some, and it's a great opportunity. Or, I've offered like a board game club during lunch where it's open to all students, but then kind of personally inviting, students that you think might be able to use those sorts of things. So I think unfortunately this year, there's not as many opportunities for those things given our circumstance, but hopefully they'll be able to be back soon.
Did anyone else have any questions for our speakers? You can either type it in the chat, or if it's just easier, feel free to unmute yourself and ask away.
Well, I'll fill the time for a second just to let you know I kept going off and on. So I'm just updating you on my gnat situation. I bought some gnat traps last night at Home Depot, and I think I was having some sort of massive allergic reaction to the one on my desk. So I don't have COVID, but I could not quit coughing. So I do apologize for coming on and off the screen. I moved the trap.
Very good. I'm glad you're taking care of yourself. Sorry that has happened to you.
Self-care. Got to do it.
Well, I really appreciate you guys taking the time today to present this material. I think it's very helpful. I don't see any other questions coming in via the chat, so I just wanted to say thank you. Someone did say, pour really hot water down all the drains. It will help with the gnats.
I don't have any drains in my office.
Maybe you have a fruity perfume that they just really are seeking you out for that reason.
I think I'm going to resort to not showering and see if that.
But thanks again for everyone's time today. And please do keep an eye out for our next upcoming presentation on February 18th. And this, if you need to watch this again, we'll be posting these links for this presentation and the one tonight. Those will be available as well. Oh, and keep an eye out for the survey link. And actually, I think you can just visit our website directly, and there is a survey tab. So percdublin.org. Check it out. And thanks again, Megan and Kim.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Bye.